Hello, everyone. This is Colleen Murray, Chief Academic Officer of the Haddonfield School District. This recording will describe a learning design framework specifically for the Haddonfield School District. I want to tell you that I'm only choosing to make one recording of today's session. I'm doing that to model the vulnerability that we're all going to be feeling this year as we record many sessions and share those recordings. I don't want you to feel that you have to slow yourself down by re-recording everything that you do. So as difficult as this is for me, I'm just going once over. Our framework is designed around our strategic goals. So everything that we do when we plan for a day or a week or a month or a year should be within the framework of our strategic goals, which are to be culturally responsive, to design experiences that nurture social emotional learning, and to make our learning contemporary in its design. Culturally responsive learning means to start by listening, and to include social emotional learning means to understand that learning is emotional. And to be contemporary with our learning means to know the importance of providing a learner-driven social context that's supported with technology. Cultural responsiveness is something that we've been talking about for a couple of years now, and it's the most important issue that we have, and all of the other goals stem from cultural responsiveness. We know that all students perform better on multiple measures of achievement when teaching is filtered through a student's own cultural experiences. This is from Teachers College research that has been cited over 11,000 times. Cultural responsiveness is more of a process than a strategy. It begins when a teacher recognizes the cultural capital and tools students of color bring to the classroom. And this is taken from Zaretta Hammond's book, Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. Your administrative team had a book study on it this summer, and we shared experiences that we could relate to the book. It's something I highly recommend. I've read it 3 times, and I have both the paperback and the audio version of this book. Hammond also said that cultural responsiveness is our ability to recognize students' cultural displays of learning and meaning-making and respond constructively with teaching moves that use cultural knowledge as a scaffold to connect what the student knows to new concepts and content. So what does that mean in the classroom? How to be responsive is to listen, respond, have a mindset, and act in ways that are responsive. Listening is important because we need to think about our own biases as we're listening to students. Are we having high expectations for everyone? Are we assuming good intentions? And we respond readily with interest and enthusiasm. This is easy for teachers because we tend to like and love everyone. Our mindset is open and eager and receptive. This means that we have to seem like a learner. We have to be a learner for our students all the time. And we act quickly and positively with the information that we get through our observations and interactions. Here's a little example of what it means to be culturally responsive. And you'll notice that nothing about color is mentioned in this. It's more of a process. It's not just a strategy. It's a mindset. They say, today in PLC, a colleague described how she keeps a spreadsheet of things that happen on screen. Like a cat walks across the screen. Instead of chiding the student, she records, student has a cat, ask its name later. That tiny little move is about relationship now and later. And that reminded me of a strategy I used in the classroom during the first day of school when we had our silly little activity, such as 2 truths and a lie. And I would map out where the students were sitting, and next to their name, I would jot down little notes about what they said so that I could refer back to it later. And I had substitutes tell me what a great tool it was and how helpful it was for them. And I know that you probably have dozens of strategies just like that, but I think it's a good example of wanting to know more about your students as individuals. So on that note, In the live session, we'll be taking a break to talk about these questions. Do you have a routine process that facilitates responsiveness? And we'll be sharing about that together. It'll be a nice discussion. About social emotional learning, our other goal. So this is the second of 3 goals, strategic goals that we have as a district. And I'm going to talk about why it matters and what it is. If you've been here last year, you already know a lot about this topic because Dr. Triolo and the team in the district has been helping us learn about what that means. So to be social and emotional, to have learning that's social and emotional, means to have self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. In perhaps simpler terms, this self-awareness, self-management, empathy, and cooperation, if you can remember those core concepts, it'll help in your design. But even better is to use Yale's emotional ruler that we've adopted as a district as our framework for thinking about our lesson design. It means providing opportunities for you and your students to recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate our emotions. A little reflection break. Which of these verbs does your subject matter most easily lend itself to? And of course, there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. But it's a way to think about what we're already using in the classroom. And the third of the 3 strategic goals is contemporary learning. It means learning is authentic and purposeful and infused with technology to make life easier. Hybrid model syncs quite easily, I'm sure you know, with contemporary learning. So if you haven't done any of these strategies regularly, with any regularity, this year it should be easier because you'll find that having these hybrid model components will make your life more enjoyable. It'll make your class more enjoyable. But I imagine you're all doing some variation of these, which is why Haddonfield is such a wonderful district. So first, it's student voice and choice, and second is learner engagement, and third is learner responsibility. I'll go through each of these one by one. Student voice and choice means to allow students to share who they are, what they care about, what they want to do and be. Learner engagement means grabbing attention and holding their focus, cognitively, emotionally, and behaviorally. And learner responsibility means allowing students to own their struggles, their choices, and their outcomes, and these become the driver of their future opportunities. So let's start with student voice and choice. It means having a stake in learning. So their choices trigger their interest and their investment in their learning. Learning is co-created because it's social. It's created in dialogue with you and the student. And it's geared towards mastery. So opportunities for self-grading and choosing of projects is wonderful for this. It uses flipped learning. That means the choice to explore content independently using the preferred media method, whether it be audio or visual or discussion or what have you. And preferred modes of expression as well, such as drawing, acting, speaking, and writing. And it also involves creative production of some sort. Later in the year, we're going to learn about project-based learning, which will help you come up with ideas that will offer opportunities for creative production, such as video production, reenactments, interviews, how-tos, book reviews, and analysis of events. Next is learner engagement. What that means is, what are some examples of learning engagement are dialogic reading, using inquiry charts, Socratic seminars, utilizing rubrics, peer interviews, and progress monitoring. So these keep students engaged because, for instance, with dialogic reading, they take turns during read-alouds. That means they're paying attention because they don't know when their turn is coming, and they like to hear their classmates reading as well. Inquiry chart is where you use a graphic organizer to generate questions. Socratic Seminar is a student-led discussion around shared content, and it's wildly popular with students. Rubrics come in many shapes and sizes, and they're best when they're co-created with students. They always include goal criteria and descriptions of quality work. Peer interviews are wonderful because it helps students practice their social emotional learning. They interview each other while a third person takes notes. And progress monitoring is when we collect information that we can use to analyze it to inform our future instruction, which is highly culturally responsive. This is an example that demonstrates the connection between learner engagement and ownership of learning. So one of the things that we have a hard time with as teachers, one of the things that makes our jobs more difficult, is that to engage students in struggle sometimes can be very uncomfortable. Students, learners, me, you probably don't like to struggle, but we know that that's a core component of learning. So what this demonstrates is that a lecture-based classroom feels comfortable. It's not uncomfortable like the struggle with having to do something more active. And learners tend to evaluate lecture-based learning higher than non-lecture-based learning, than active learning. So they tend to think that I've heard a great lecture, I've learned so much, when in fact the learning doesn't correlate as well as active learning. So here's a reflection break. What are some inferences we can make about the chart above? Next, it's important to take a moment to think about universal design for learning and learner engagement. Now, last spring, if you were here with us and you were using remote learning, you probably noticed that some students might have surprised you. They might have done a little bit better than you had expected or better than you were used to in the classroom. And this is because a lot of the strategies we use in hybrid learning environments hinges on universal design for learning. So we know that UDL is culturally responsive, it's contemporary, it supports social emotional learning, and it lends naturally to the hybrid environment. So if you click on the word strategies, it'll take you to the source for this information, and it's very rich and it has so many opportunities to try to expand your repertoire for learning design to make sure that it hits on universal design for learning strategies. So what it does is it engages, it represents, and it offers opportunities for expression. So for instance, self-regulation is a part of engagement. It optimizes choice and autonomy in order to be engaging. When we represent information, we customize the ways we display that information. Maybe we clarify vocabulary and symbols. We illustrate through multiple media. Expression means that we offer a variety of methods for responding. So you teachers who are using Seesaw, you've probably seen the joys and the ease with which we can allow our students to express themselves in a variety of ways. If you're using Screencastify this year, you'll probably find that students will take to it very nicely. Assistive technologies are part of how we allow our students choice with expression. And learner responsibility. Learner responsibility is about allowing the student to own that struggle and to own the output of the consequences of their actions. So it's not about setting them free and giving them too much freedom and negligence. It's about scaffolding and allowing them choice along the way, and then allowing them to fall down if they have to. So that it means talking less and listening more. It means asking for input and feedback from our students on a regular basis. It means asking open-ended questions with more than one possible answer, which is uncomfortable because sometimes the students might come back and ask you for the answer. And maybe it's a question that doesn't have an answer yet, but it's still worthy, perhaps even more worthy of our attention and time. We test less, but we assess more. So assessment happens on a regular, ongoing, formative basis. We feed forward. I'll talk about that on the next slide. It's my new favorite thing. We let students decide how they engage, what they want to focus on, within limits, of course, because we have our goals as well as teachers, and how to demonstrate their learning. We offer loads of opportunities for reflection. We have thinking routines in our classroom. We provide thought-provoking questions, and we demonstrate consequential reasoning. I shared this in my last email to all of you about the difference between feedback and feed forward. I happen to love both, but I think this is a great opportunity to look at the forward-thinking nature of that give and take relationship that we have, teacher and student. So feeding forward means regenerating talent. Instead of saying, good job, we can ask them how they can use that skill in the future. Instead of pointing out problems, we can expand possibilities. What if we tried this? Have you thought about trying that? It's particular. So we talked about rubrics before. Rubrics can be tricky because they're tempting to just dump information. But the more succinct, the better, because it's particular. Feeding forward is particular, ongoing, and it's embedded in instruction. So it's not showing the rubric at the end of the assignment, at the end of the project, but it's referring to the rubric as almost a guide post. It tries not to be mean in the feedback section, which is not always easy for us straightforward New Jersey folks. Sometimes people will use a praise sandwich, and sometimes that comes off as gauzy and phony. But instead, feeding forward is authentic, not mean. My best friend tells me to say what you mean what you say, but try not to be mean when you say it. And so feeding forward is about being authentic. It has an impact. There's a way that they can use that information to create change in their future. And it refines group dynamics because it comes from many different angles. Some of the best feedback students shared with me in the past came from their classmates who offered feedback in a structured way. When you try it early on, students tend to be very general and vague. Great job, nice eye contact. But the more that you ask them to really think about the details of their feedback, their feed forward, if you will, the better the feedback will be, and students love getting it from each other. This was taken from one of our high school teachers, world language teachers, curriculum writing project this summer. They created a rubric where the students are the owner of those red circles. They get to move the red circles to where they think they belong, and then they even have a green square to put on sections that they think they did well on. Here's a reflection break. What is your favorite reflection activity? And here's an activity for those of you who are at our session. We'll be exploring contemporary learning, social emotional learning, and cultural responsiveness with little ways to think about it and to try to categorize it. So for those of you at home, your goal is to take each of these little sticky notes and to try to think about what color they should be, meaning which one do they go with. So if we look at our experiences can inform others, we should think about, would it be blue or pink or green? And then we would have a discussion about it. But for you at home, maybe you can talk to the person who's nearest to you. And the last segment is on lesson design for hybrid learning. So all of what we've talked about is certainly about lesson design, but this gets a little bit more to the nitty-gritty. This is probably your weekly planning cycle if you've been doing remote learning. Hybrid learning is going to be very similar, if a little bit more difficult, because there's more to juggle. But every week you'll be setting goals that should be based on the standards. You'll be planning the scaffolding, which is in the form of instruction and supporting activities. You'll be planning assessments, which of course are standards-based and based on the goals that you've set. And it's recommended that you screencast your plans on a weekly basis for your parents and students to focus and review. Parents in our focus groups last spring told us over and over again that teachers who used this strategy, they found it to be very helpful, and they appreciated that it saved them loads and loads of time trying to figure out what the goals of the teacher were. So screencasting your plans for the week is highly, highly recommended, and it's something that you should work on with your grade level or department team as well. And lastly, you analyze the results of the week so that you can determine what to plan next. Here, this is taken from one of our teacher leaders at the elementary school level, and they offer a master guide to help them think about the big picture for each day. So next we talk about family support and supporting families. That screencasting strategy that I just discussed is meant to help support the families who are dying to support us. So this is a very give and take relationship that we need to lean on, and we need to help our families feel confident that they're doing the right things. And then we need to provide them the information that's going to help them to support us. So that means listening to families. It means listening to the flexibility needs that they have. When a family says that my child is frequently bored, we need to be responsiveness. When a parent says that my child is spending until 6 o'clock every night, we need to be responsive and flexible. So your weekly screencast to your parents should preview what your week is going to look like. The objectives, the connections to prior learning, how attendance is taken, and this update should be posted on your website or on your learning management system and your website, which most people have their learning management system linked on their website, which is entirely appropriate. If you click where it says click here, you'll see a tutorial that one of our teacher leaders made on screencasting. It's very helpful and very informative. So the next step is to prepare your activities, your scaffolding activities, your engagement activities. And you'll post that content on your learning management system. So what course readings would you be using? What digital texts? Are you providing podcasts, videos, recorded lectures? And here are some sources that you can use for those. So on the linked presentation, I'll link the presentation to the video comments. You'll be able to click on those links that show you model work for each of the school levels. This is not inclusive, of course, these are just samplings, but these are things that I felt were worthy of sharing with you. And so here's more about engagement. Engagement can be practice problems, it can be research writing, it can be audio submissions, discussion boards, reflective writing, and journaling. There's plenty of on-demand tools that you can use to help with that. So when we say on-demand, I'm trying to use that more frequently than asynchronous learning because it just seems a little bit more intuitive. Of course, I found that on Twitter. And this I took from one of our professional development presenters from last year, Katie Baker. And she teaches about how to use personal playlists. This is very effective to provide student choice and voice and learner engagement. And it also frees you from being, as they say, the sage on the stage. It gives the students an opportunity to practice their SEL with executive function. And it provides a support system for blended and flipped learning. Now, if you're on the actual presentation link, the original link, you'll be able to click some of these and you'll be able to find models. And she even shares the model of her playlist. So tips for live lessons. You'll be working with your teacher leaders and your principals to decide on how to establish norms, such as it's highly recommended that every teacher expressly say that students should not be sharing pictures or images without permission. You'll be deciding how to greet students, setting chat parameters such as you can only use public chat, which again is recommended that they don't use private chat. How you're going to preview objectives, including your expectations for participation, how are you going to engage the students, and how will you review the work. And this is a demonstration created to show you how to live stream your work. And here, if you click on this slide where it says click here, it'll take you to an exit ticket. Exit tickets, I'm sure most of you have been using them. They're a wonderful way to check for student engagement, to check for their understanding, and to find out how you can improve your instruction and personalize instruction going forward. Here are some of the questions. The reflection sheet asks you to choose one of them and expand on it using evidence from this presentation. How have some of your teachers used their understanding of your differences to inform your learning experiences? Why is it important to provide chances to backchannel? What is the relationship between classroom expectations and student voice and choice? What are some strategies you can use to encourage students to recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate their emotions? Why is collaboration important for learning? And what kind of classwork encourages social emotional learning? That is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.